Thank you for joining us this evening for the Artists Exchange, a group created by and for artists to share new work, ideas, resources, and opportunities monthly, or actually you'll find out later bi-monthly, over a glass of wine or tea as you prefer. And you've let us know in the chat where you're from, and we appreciate that. So grab your drink and join us as we discover the work of two wonderful artists. I'm Shelley Rugg, the Executive Director at Gallery Route 1 and the co-producer of the Artists Exchange. For our presentation today, we ask that you please stay muted until we ask you to unmute. And for best viewing, select speaker view from the top right corner of the Zoom viewing screen. We want you to know that we are recording today's session for future viewing on our website and YouTube channel. And if you haven't joined our YouTube channel, please check it out and be a subscriber. Now, please join me in welcoming writer, co-producer, and host of the Artists Exchange, Pamela Blattner. She's an East Bay artist and educator who has taught at several universities, including the University of San Francisco, the San Francisco Art Institute, the University of Chicago, and at Pixar Animation Studios. In 2017, she was appointed to a U.S. Arts Envoy to Burma. Please join me in welcoming Pamela Blattner.
Thank you, Shelley. That was lovely. Okay, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guests. Our guests tonight are Bay Area artists Livia Stein and Jan Wurm. Entering an exhibition by these painters is like embarking on an ocean cruise. Each artist leads her viewer on a voyage across colorful seascapes and populated by uniquely human figures.
Can you pause for a moment?
Sure.
Pause for a moment, Pamela. Livia,
I'm screwed up. Yeah.
It's okay. Just stop share.
Stop share. Okay, there.
Oh,
I
right.
still don't have anybody else on my screen. It's a gallery view.
If you want to see everyone, you choose gallery view, yes.
Okay.
All right. And back to you, Pamela.
Okay, thank you, Livia. I muffed my last line, so now I get to do it over again. Each artist leads her viewers on a voyage across colorful seascapes populated by uniquely animated human figures. While their images may reflect the same concerns, they are guided by different sensibilities, as you will see. And so to begin us off, I would like to introduce Jan Wurm. Take it away. Oh, I have to introduce you first. For Jan, drawing is a way of understanding life for both the artist and the viewer. She uses her art to create narratives that examine relationships, place, and human nature. With her limited palette and dramatic gestures, Wurm creates figures that emphasize their connections or isolation from one another. This in turn creates a social discourse between the artist and the viewer. Now, take it away, Jan.
Thank you very much, Pamela, and also Shelley. This is such a great pleasure to be able to be with you and to enter into this conversation with Livia, which is really one of the most favorite things to do for any painter, I think, is to talk about painting. And so I think the first slide . Thank you. On the course is a painting from 1988, and it demonstrates formal elements that are used in composing a visual narrative to underscore themes of power and assertion, engagement or isolation, the private and public appearance. From a flat spatial rendering, forms of the golf carts and the canopies compress the figures into a central melee of posturing arms and limbs. And linear forces of the golf clubs and the steering wheels direct our attention to the triangulation of arms, echoing a visual rhyming. So very early on, I had an interest in patterning. This also has a very limited palette. You've got the green and the yellow going back and forth in these rhythms. Next slide, please. So from this point, we come to a painting which actually makes a great leap. Home Fires of 1988 evolved out of a journey for a visual stream of consciousness that led to contrasted parallel experiences. So an attempt to deal with the inner and the outer and parallel times. Here the man suavely dances and romances aboard ship, while a wife is left at home, and we see her in a red dress in the deepest, darkest recesses as she's gassing herself in the oven. And also very hard to see, but standing by are two children who will discover her. So this influence of literary techniques and interests in going deeper than the surface led me to this. Next slide, please. And Bride and Groom of 1999 uses the diptych to manifest these divergent expectations. On the left, we have the bride who from childhood has enacted a romantic vision of magical transformation. And in opposition, we have on the right, the groom, uncomfortable in dress clothes, in social spotlight, and more engaged by a game of poker. And the contrast between these two, male and female, young and old, and all of the fantasies provides an opportunity for a lot of other themes that come up in much of my work, themes of fantasy, photography, false records, posturing, pretense, and hidden agendas. And they're all served by these divided panels that carry throughout my work. Next slide. Thank you. This is Prometheus. And Prometheus takes on an interweaving of Greek myth, and it's bound with contemporary political prisoner who's being interrogated. There's a menacing torture of lighted cigarette and match there, so that these images of mythology can be used to echo the contemporary as well. Questions of faith and ethics and judgment were all explored in a series of paintings juxtaposing ancient tales with the current events. And they were done at the time that we entered the Gulf Wars. And of course, at that time, I had no idea that these wars would actually mirror the length and involvement in the years of the Greek wars, which then follows in that contemporary. And here is Othello of 2005. So Shakespeare brings together themes of false counsel that also haunt fairy tales and serve as cautionary tales. And by bringing the acid yellow-green of Iago's words into the body of Othello, the accusations and doubts reverberate, and they also carry across the picture plane, as does the embroidery of the falsely incriminating handkerchief. So this echoes the scarification and otherness that lie at the root of identity. Next slide, please. The men and women aboard are divided by the physical structure of the diptych, a split reinforcing their gendered segregation. This Ship of Fools of 2018 captures the red sky of pollution, our fires that we had that turned our skies red, and brings to the surface the devastation of marine life. So all along the water at the edge of the ship, there are the skeletal remains of the marine life. Next slide, please. Facility of 2021, bringing us really close to the present, renders the inhuman treatment of children separated from parents at the border, and it locks them between panels of inhumane treatment of animals as collected specimens. So flanking the central panel of this triptych, on the left, we have a mother and child, and on the right, the bewildered juvenile who's isolated. So next slide, please. Although I've only been speaking about painting until now, I want to talk about drawing. The realm of freedom that's entered with every new piece of paper, the turn of each page in the sketchbook, or in this case, the embrace of any odd materials. And here I've pursued some of the same issues using overlays of clear mylar to trace across generations and through time. Next slide, please. Here, the black and white ball thrown by Truman Capote is drawn on 10 generations of Xeroxes of the mugshots of the murderers he wrote about in Cold Blood. So with each iteration, the faces in the mugshots become more obscured, but at the same time, the darkness deepens as the ink coagulates from one copy, from the copy, from the copy, from the copy, so that in the end, you have a stain that remains like the mark of Cain. Next slide, please. Survivors of 2019 is drawn on unstretched canvas, unraveling like social fabric torn asunder by gun violence. And here the girls, after a school shooting, are clothed alike to reiterate the random repetition, the senseless loss, and the way in which the years have normalized these atrocities with a cloaked anonymity. There's also a collaged element to this piece. The dress, the wedding dress, the prom dress that will never be worn by the child whose life is robbed of them. Next slide, please. This is a series of monotypes, 2 degrees C, which projects and looks at global warming, consequences, adaptations, and an environment in which the simplest seaside pleasure becomes a covered up affair, becomes a nocturnal expedition where we are unable to be out in the daytime. And for many of us now, we've already reached that point on our planet. Next slide, please. Late in 2021, just as the new year of 2022 was beginning, a series of monotypes, Target, gave expression to concerns about the imminent overturning of Roe versus Wade. The figures from Target for the carnival knife throwing thrill became a symbol of the attack on women's bodies, health, and their rights. The scale and speed of drawing provide a nimble ground for the topical that balances with the long hours in the studio waiting for the paint to dry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. That was great. Okay. What I'd like to do is I would like to introduce our other guest, and then after she finishes talking, the two will have the opportunity to tune in together. So I would like to introduce you to Livia Stein, who calls herself an observer, traveling the globe, studying art, people, architecture, and meditating on the meaning of art. She paints her daily life and infusing images with her deep love of drawing and painting. Viewers are invited to join her and participate in sharing a journey of art making and to discover a world of their own. Thank you, Livia. Take it away.
So hello, and thank you very much for asking us to do this. And I started to recognize what you were saying, and then I realized that was partially a quote from me.
Yes.
So I would like to reiterate that I really juggle things in my head and have specific likes and dislikes and political thoughts on all of the above kind of things like the environment and such. But I find that when I try to do them too directly or with a particular story, then it's not me. So what I really care about is the paint and the experience of painting. And I won't say much about the work other than asking you to look at it and make up your own story, what it feels to you for the most part. So yeah. This is a piece that's partially printmaking and partially drawing and a little bit of paint. Oh, this one. How come they're going so fast?
I apologize. It's on auto slideshows. So let me see if I can change that. Sorry.
Well, it gives us another minute to look at things, which is great.
Let's try doing it this way. Okay.
Okay. So this is obviously a mixed media print on printmaking paper. And my thoughts just sort of evolved with the people. A lot of what I do is about communication between people. And sometimes it seems fruitful and sometimes it seems fruitless. But this is what it's about somewhat. Next slide. Oh, this is, I started doing, I don't know if you can read this. It's, I think it's what Pamela said, so you don't have to read it again. Beanie Boy. I find that it's just fun to think of childhood things like the beanie caps that, you run around in the wind and they rotate. And he just came to mind, and so I decided to draw Beanie Boy. Next. These two pieces, I'm sorry they're on the same, I don't know why they're on two on each page, but the one on the left is sort of explanatory. It's a collage and some fabric on stretch canvas and collage. And it wasn't one of the easy things to do, and none of them are, but in particular, that one, it had a lot of guessing for a while. But then I came around to really liking the shape, and it reminded me somewhat of a trip I took to Berlin and thought a lot about the Holocaust and such. So that's about that one. And the one on the right is about people not communicating, separate people doing everything separately, really where it is. And Pink Bunny on the left was something else for quite a while. I've started to have a different philosophy on painting than I did when I was younger. I think that everything you do, no matter how bad you think it is, if you keep going with things, it's like a refreshing experience. It's like thinking that something has failed, but you just keep working on it and working on it. And pretty soon it's something completely different. And that was a story of this little bunny. I love painting rocks. So my rocks are very unrealistic, as most of my work is, but they're fun rocks. And I realized that this painting with a bunny was a double entendre. It's a face as well as a bunny. So I didn't realize that until I stopped painting on it and moved back. So I like that kind of thing. It's like Archimboldo, I think that is his name, all the little fruits within the size shape of a body. It's like one thing within another. It's like a guessing game. And this is the one on the right, the crocodile one. No longer has the crocodile, so I should have changed the title, but yeah, this was another layer of this painting, and it was really about fun, just feeling good about the environment and feeling good about life if you can. So it was kind of whimsical for me. And the one on the left is a photo. It's a painting on top of an archival photo that I printed on my printer on good paper and then did gouache on it. And I've done a whole series of these from interiors in museums to farms or whatever. Just the picture is like a prompt in literature. It just gets me started sometimes. And I see a story there that I kind of reinvent with every new shape that reminds me of something else. It's like I let the shapes tell me where the painting should go. I start off mastering what I want to do, but then the painting takes over itself. That's true of generally most all my work. I let the paint keep me going. And eating flowers, yes. If any of you are painters and have not used Yupo paper, it's actually a synthetic paper. It's polypropylene, and it comes in different thicknesses, and it comes opaque and translucent. And it's wonderful to work on with water media. It slips and slides the first few layers, and then it gets some stability because it has those layers that are dried underneath, and you can work up with it on gouache, and it drips a lot. It's fun. So I highly recommend it. Next one. Aha. This one, fashion, mixed media on panel. I started doing, using fabric as my paint and my texture and my color. I did a whole series of things where I was going, I live near the Depot for Creative Reuse, and I was going there just obsessively for a while to see what they had in that was new. And I did these pieces on board. It doesn't really work well on canvas, but I tried to let go of the look of what the fabric was by itself and just really enjoyed the idea of letting it layer itself like a painting. Oh, and then the upper left-hand corner is this little gorilla. I don't know why he's there either, but it's a statement of some sort, but I'm not sure what. I just wanted to make it, so I did. And the greener monotype was from a series of black and white monotypes that I did in 2022, where I was looking at pictures of garments and hats in a book that was written in the Renaissance of costumes of the world. And it was fascinating because so many of them were like really heavy, huge things. I mean, some of the hats were as big as half of the person. So I'm interested in that. I'm just amazed at what people will wear. And particularly then when they didn't bathe, you know, they had these heavy garments that hid their odors because they, didn't have any choice but to do that. Anyway, that's the story on that one. Okay. The green monster is one of the photo paper pieces, and it speaks for itself. Whatever, could be our former president, but I've seen a lot nastier things about him, so I don't know. He could be whoever. He's sort of not really a very capable monster. He's not going to scare anybody, I hope. And then hat with green, the monotype on the right, is another one of those hat pictures that I took from this book on fashion. The feathers, and some of the hats are just works of art by themselves. Okay, we can discount that one on the right, it got duplicated. This one, I must have been in a very angry mood. So it's like, it's a stalemate. Okay. The one on the left is, I was working for a while on unstretched canvas, and I bought a set of grommets so that I was thinking of grommeting them to the wall. And this piece was the first one I did from that series, and I had to gesso it so that I could use oil on it. But it's part collage and part drawing, and there's a lot of other stuff. Maybe it's a self-portrait, I don't know. And the one on the right, Twins, is one of these paintings that went through lots of changes. And I started thinking of Siamese twins who were joined together at the hip and shoulder. And I've done two-headed figures before. I think it's very humorous. Maybe it represents the two sides of your personality, or many sides, but good and evil, whatever. The one on the left was done after a visit to the Diyang, when I saw this Chinese fashion show. It was incredible. There were so many ornately beaded dresses and outfits that would be impossible to wear. They're created for the art, and the mannequins were all wearing them, and you couldn't imagine any real living person wearing them. So it was a lot of fun. And then the woman with two lips, I don't know. The third eye is the eye of knowledge, but the two lips kind of defeat that. This one is called Buzz, and it addresses tinnitus, the buzzing people get in their ears, which I'm subject to. So I decided I would draw a real bumblebee, and did. And he's looking through a funnel on the other ear. I really enjoyed making this painting. It's 30 by 30 or so. Oh wait, I have it written here, 32 by 30. Yeah. So that's it, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you. Thank you, Lydia. And thank you, Jan. Oftentimes we ask the artists to begin their own conversation. And I'm really torn, but I want to make sure that our viewing audience get to ask you some questions first. So unless there is something that, having known each other as long as you have, that you're dying to ask each other, I would like to open up the floor to our visitors.
Good.
Anyone have a question for either artist?
Comments are okay as well.
Comments? Yes?
Someone better speak up or I'm going to jump right in because I always love talking to Livia and I always have questions.
I see Barbara has raised her hand. Just unmute yourself, Barbara, and then you can go ahead.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Livia. Hi, Jan. I hesitate to unmute myself because my dog is a little noisy. Sorry about that. I just wanted to ask you both a question about, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry about this. About your process and how you start. Do you start with an idea or with a sketch or with, I know, Livia, sometimes you have photograph you might work off of. So just a little bit about how you get going and then how you move on from there. I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Wait till you unmute. There, that's it. Been there with dogs. I know how they pick the wrong time to get lively. My process for painting is that it's recently I've been trying to change my process because I don't like when I have too fixed an idea. It gets in the way of the paint. So I come in and I put down either a main kind of color on a white canvas or several colors. And when I put down several colors, it's like using the photographs. It gives me ideas of shapes that I'm interested in. I've been interested in masking a lot. I've been interested in, to tell you the truth, I've been interested in absurdity. I mean, I think that life is absurd. So I feel like I let my paintings be absurd because they're not about real life anymore. I think that the real life out there is very politically, very hard to deal with. So my paintings are about a fantasy of my life and just as much color as I need to have in it. So the paint really drives me lately. It's becoming more abstract that way, my most recent work. And I'm happier doing it. I'm less intimidated by going into the studio, knowing that there are no mistakes, that everything you do is going to be part of this good mystery that you're just trying to solve. It's like you give yourself a puzzle and you have to work on it. And doing a painting is like that for me. It's a journey from confusion to clarity. Sometimes I never get to the clarity, but I try. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Let's see. Anyone else have a question for either of these two artists who are in love with paint? Good chance, painters. Okay, then you're up, Jan.
Great. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Livia, was about scale, because you have large paintings and you have smaller works on paper, and I'll call the Yupo and the fabric and everything else, paper. And it sounds a little funny because your figures, your creatures, your inventions are not, what we would call lifelike, but with your paintings, everything is pretty much to scale. So life scale, whatever that scale would be for whatever the invention is. And then very often with work on paper, you have this larger than life head, torso, etc. So could you talk a little bit about how you approach the one or the other, going back and forth and
Yeah.
how you readjust and recalibrate for the scale?
Uh-huh. That's a good question. I think that I enjoy working larger, but I don't always do it. You know, it's like I run out of canvases, I run out of energy. And working on the smaller pieces, I sit down and I can really get involved in the color and the paint, just really on, it's like sort of a tighter level for me. And then with the paintings, it's like I tend to use my whole body more. And that feels good too. The scale of the paper pieces is really that so much of what you want to talk about, the environment isn't really it. You know, it's like, so the larger the head or the less going on in it, the picture, I find that most attractive. I really like the less is more feeling of some works.
I have to say that when I go back and forth, I am confronted not just with recalibration, but the fact that painting on its scale on a large canvas has a monumentality of its own. And then when it comes to working on paper, and I want that same sense of seriousness or importance, if not monumentality, but monumentality also, that the scale has to shift relative to the picture plane. And
Yeah.
I'm always torn back and forth between the demands and a sense that inherently when things become smaller, physically smaller, and then within that, if you have more figures, objects, you know, landscape, that you're the diminutive becomes difficult for me to accept, you know. I have a hard time with that.
I would say that too, you know, for the most part. I think that I've learned to, I counsel myself about not rushing the painting. You know, that whereas a paper piece, your expectations are met a lot easier. You know, it's like the scale and everything is easier to deal with for me. I find that the largest paintings seem like the paint needs more attention because it's there, but if it's not rich, then it's like it's not there at all. Whereas in a paper piece, I can accomplish that a lot more easily than on a big painting. Big paintings are really the hardest thing.
You also spoke of the absurd and finding that in life. And I think what strikes me really strongly is the ephemeral quality of so much. And it's not just a matter of age. I've had to deal with this for a long time, the sense of loss and how ephemeral experience is and encounter. And I think that's one of the things I love about drawing and about working on that scale on paper is that you've got a different time frame and it matches with the ephemeral, and it's possible to give the same kind of consideration to that which is ephemeral in a form that matches with it, is somehow consistent.
Well, I've often thought that, in fact, I think someone else quoted it, but I have felt that art is poetry without words. Painting is poetry without words. And poetry is words, words without painting. Something like that. But I really understand that ephemeral quality that you're seeking. It's very transitory. You know, it comes when you hardly know it. You know, that sense of well-being. If you seek it too much, it just eludes you, I think. Just like if you try to finish a painting and have it be something, it's all like a process for me. I think that I don't have any fixed expectations, and I try to accept that I can't straitjacket it, that it really wants to do its own thing.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're getting to the point where we need to wrap up this section, and we do have a question from our audience, so I'd like to honor that. So Leanne, unmute and go ahead.
Hi, Livia. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Leanne. How are
Nice to
you?
meet you, Jan. I'm interested. Behind me, I have Olivia Hughes
Oh, yeah,
on
yeah.
my wall.
The fine cake one. I love that painting.
And I recently had a woman's lunch for a friend's birthday. And one woman was raving about the painting. And another woman spoke up and said, I hated it. I'd never have it in my house. Interested as artists, how much do you think about the audience and how much do you react to people's reactions to your work?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think most people, first of all, they don't, we sort of whisper to our friends if we're in a gallery looking at some artwork and we hate it, we whisper it, so it's like, it doesn't offend people. At least I feel like, there's to one person, what is good and peaceful and interesting to do, another person would find, compulsive and fetishy and just too awful to have to sit and make line after line, like an Agnes Martin painting with a bunch of horizontal lines that go on and on and on and on, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of little mysteries in that paint, but I can't imagine doing that work. And so I realized that, not everyone likes my work. I mean, that's part of life. And but someone was so vehement about saying they hated it. Of course, I'm sure it would affect me if I was there. Why did she hate it?
I don't know that she used the word hate, by the way, but we were just talking about what you want to have in your house and what you don't, and what you want to live with and what you don't. It was a really interesting conversation, but I would hope as artists, you're not thinking about the audience because that brings you into the commercial.
No, I don't.
But it must impact the artist to have people's reactions to your works. Anything about it for you, Jan, too?
Yeah, I in the studio, my engagement is with the painting or the drawing or the work at hand.
Yeah.
And that's really more of a relationship than I can handle actually in the studio.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the work comes up and it challenges you all the time. You think you're doing something or you're going to be able to get somewhere, and it's kind of laughing at you. So if the work is up on a wall in the gallery in a museum, people are going to respond differently, just the way they would to anything else in life. We do not see any kind of uniform response to anything in life. Right?
No.
And I also don't want to be bound by one direction in my work, or only one, if you think of music, you don't want to just compose in one key, and you want to be able to have different scales and rhythms and everything possible. And it's the same thing with the work. And, things also appeal at different times and speak to you for different reasons at different stages. I've read books at different points in time and they've had different meaning for me. I've watched films at different points in time. They've struck me differently. And the same thing with art when I look at it. Yeah. So I would just say that I'm happy if the work gets a chance to present itself, to engage in some kind of discussion and experience for the viewer. And I know myself when it comes to collecting, because I collect too, most artists do, there are things that I really love, but I wouldn't necessarily want to have them because they are so strong. They engage thought about things that are not necessarily calming or pleasant. And I couldn't look at them all the time. I have artwork that I keep in a closet and I look at it this way and then I close the door on it. Doesn't mean that I don't value it.
I'm going to jump in here and first of all, just acknowledge this awesome conversation that's happening. And this is why we created the Artist Exchange, to provide a platform for artists to learn about each other's work and processes and techniques and how we all think. And we also wanted to provide an opportunity for artists to share with each other things that are happening in the area, shows they could go see, any kind of opportunities, grants, fellowships, residencies. So we all will share some things with you, but if anyone in the audience also has something to offer, we would love to hear about it. How about you, Pamela? Do you have something to share?
Tonight, I'm afraid I don't. I'm on the road. I'm in an Airbnb as we speak. And so I will pass this on to you, Shelley.
Well, I would invite Jan and Livia next if you have anything that you'd like to share. And if you have any links, you can always pop them in the chat, into the chat.
Okay. Well, I have
Yeah.
a Instagram account, which really shows a lot of my current work. You know, it's just, you put it up there and it's up for a couple of days and then not. And that's Livia Stein Art. And when you're on Instagram, you just plug that in and it'll get to my page. And I use that as a tool to actually show works in progress. I did a series of paintings that I just kept photographing every day, you know, and it was so interesting to see the changes. I don't know, other people would find that so interesting, but it was something I was going to say about, go ahead, Jen.
I have an announcement to make for you, Livia.
That's right.
I just curated an exhibition that's called Staying Power, Women Artists Forging Through the Decades. And Livia's work will be in that exhibition, opening at Show Gallery in Berkeley in about 3 weeks.
Oh, I wanted to say, I just started reading this book called Art Without Men by, what's her name? She's an art historian. She also has a podcast. And, you know, a lot of the women that I read about, I knew about, but it's kind of a different perspective she has. And I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, I have one very important thing to share. Gallery Route 1 is doing a membership drive right now. We're looking for new members to be part of our artist exhibition program. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat for that. Oh, my computer decided to bog down now all of a sudden. Okay, here we go. So if you're interested in that, there's a link you can click on to find out more. I would also love to share with you a link to our current exhibitions. Right now, we're showing work by our artist members, and each artist member invited another artist to show. And so it's a very, very interesting and exciting exhibit to check out.
Like it.
And that one closes this weekend. So hopefully you can get out there to see it.
There are all sorts of advantages to being an artist member, besides, you know, getting to show at the gallery, specific time, getting to meet wonderful new artists and come to events like this one.
Right. And also, if you aren't on our email list, go ahead and drop your email in the chat for me, and then I'll make sure and get you added so that you receive our e-blasts. And I wanted to thank Phelan for donating to the program tonight. She's already left the room, so to speak. So we'll let her know another way that we appreciate her donation. I am also going to put a link in the chat for donating to this program. We are hoping to build a budget for the Artist Exchange so that we can provide stipends to the artists who participate, as well as other up-leveling that we'd like to do for the program. So when you go, if you follow that link, make sure that you do the scroll down the menu button so that you find Artist Exchange as an option.
I think.
Okay, anything else?
Nothing that I can think of now, and I'll make up for it. You know, oh yes, did we say that we're moving our schedule? I know you referred to it. We did have the program appear once a month, but we feel that we can build the program out a little bit more if we have one every other month. So we will be back in September 20th. And I believe that one of the artists who will be with us will be Jeannie O'Connor, and the other one will be Marilyn Levin. And other than that, I would like to thank Jan Wurm and Livia Stein so much for being our guests on the program, and thank our audience for coming. We do this
Thank
for
you.
you.
Thank
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 you.
you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, we do record these events, and so look for those on our website. Find under programs, the programs tab. You can find the Artist Exchange, and on that page are all the past shows, I think, with the exception of one, maybe. And also just planting a seed here. I kind of have a vision of a fundraiser for Artist Exchange where we meet live at the gallery with as many of our past participants as possible. So if you think that sounds like an idea that you could enjoy, then just put a yes in the chat for me so we'll know. And if you are interested in presenting as an artist in a future event, be sure to send an email to Pamela. It's PamelaBlotner@gmail.com. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you showing up and joining the conversation with these wonderful artists.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.